Well, it's been 2 years going into season 3 using my Husqvarna Automowers. How have they been performing? Have I ever had to cut my grass again? Would I recommend these things to you? I'm going to talk about all that up next. Hey everyone, my name is Jeff, and on this channel I do tech reviews and I review different tech projects. 2 years ago I bought myself, not sponsored or anything like that, purchased 2 Husqvarna Automowers after doing some research, and I went through the whole setup process with the goal to eliminate me having to cut my grass. We have previously had a Craftsman riding lawnmower, and it would take me about an hour and a half to cut my lawn about once a week, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, depending on the weather here in Wisconsin. Now, there was some significant cost to purchasing these auto mowers, and there was some significant time I spent doing the installation. If you guys want to check out more information in depth on what I did for the installation and all that I've done, a couple of videos on the installation and a 2-month later review. You can check those out. Those will be linked down below. So now going into my 3rd year using these mowers, a couple of things I want to talk about. So first off, every season, and our cutting season here in Wisconsin is pretty much the end of April through sometime in October, I've got the mower set up. Now it gets pretty cold here for the winter, and it's recommended that in the climate like we have here in Wisconsin, where it'll even get down into negative temperatures, that for the winter season, you take down the mower. Our mower consists of the unit itself that rolls all around the yard cutting, as well as a charging station that screws down into the ground with 4 screws, and that's where the boundary wires and the guide wire get pushed into. It takes me probably about a half hour to an hour at the end of each season to remove that charging station. I usually tie up the wires and kind of waterproof them for the winter, and then in the spring I go through the process of replacing the charger and rewiring it back up. There are occasional wire breaks, and the last 2 years in using this, for whatever reason, in the spring when I go to set up the mowers again, what has happened is there's usually a line break, and you see this because instead of getting a solid green light on the charging station showing that everything is good, there'll be a flashing blue light indicating that somewhere in that boundary wire, that's the wire that I laid going around the boundary of my yard to keep the mower in my yard from escaping, somewhere there's been a cut or a slice or a break in that wire, and I will then need to use the wire detector unit that I purchased to go around, figure out where that break is, use a patch cable with some couplers, and patch that up. That process can take anywhere from 10 minutes to sometimes it's taken me a couple of hours to search around finding that break. So that's all time that I have invested in the mower, usually at the beginning of the season. Now, during the season, as far as cutting, everything seems to work great from the boundary wire standpoint. Occasionally, I'll be doing some maintenance to my yard outside, and I might strike the boundary cable. But I usually know right then and there that I've done something, like I've taken a shovel, I'm digging a hole, and you know, as hard as I tried not to hit that boundary wire, I managed to hit it, and now I need to quick patch it up, but that is very rare. And real quick, as we do in all the videos on this channel, I've hidden Tinker. Tinker's our little hidden robot, and he's going to briefly pop up at some point during this video. If you're the first person to correctly spot Tinker, take note of the timestamp. That is the amount of time into this video that Tinker pops up, and you might be like Gary Mason, 7927, one of our recent viewers, to find Tinker in one of our recent videos. I'm giving him a shout out. I'll give you a shout out in one of my future videos, as well as I will add your name to our Tinker Ford Hall of Fame if you're the first person to spot Tinker, and let me know the timestamp down in the comments section below. So how do the mowers run? So some things that I want to point out. The mowers do great with grass that I would say is about 2 to 3 inches high. Anything that's going to be longer than that, the mower has a very difficult time going over and effectively cutting it. It probably can do it, but from what I've noticed, because we've got little dips and hills in our yard, it will start to get stuck. That is too much grass for the mower to handle, and so it starts to have problems. It'll continue turning and avoiding those areas with the higher grass, or it'll just get stuck, things like that. So the mowers are great as long as you've got short grass, but you know, if we get a lot of rain, if we've had several days here where it's rained back to back, and I can't run the mowers because our backyard is so wet on that like fourth or fifth day now after all that rain. As things starts to dry back out, our grass has grown significantly. The mower can tend to start having problems cutting that taller grass. So we still have our riding mower, and I occasionally will pull the thing out if there are spots in our yard that might get too high for the mower to handle. But most effectively, even looking at the past 2 years, I know last season we didn't have a ton of rain, so I was able to run the mowers quite consistently, and they were able to keep the grass short enough where I didn't even have to pull out the riding mower. Half of my yard, the areas that border my neighbors, I completely buried the boundary wire, and I made a trench a couple inches down in the ground, and then recovered it with sod so that you don't even see the wire. That takes a lot of work, and so in other areas where it's going by our sidewalks and along our driveway, to save me some time and effort, instead of completely burying the wire, I just staked it down. Now the units themselves come with these plastic stakes. You can also buy them separately if you need more, but it's essentially just a stake that goes down into the ground that holds the wire close to the ground, and then over time it starts to sink into the ground, and you barely notice that it's there, but it's definitely not completely buried like it is along the borders where I completely covered it with dirt. What happens in the winter here in Wisconsin is that as the ground freezes and thaws, it pushes all those plastic stakes back up. So in the spring, I have to walk around the perimeter of my yard when I'm setting everything back up and just step on all those stakes because they've popped out of the ground or they're sticking up. They're definitely not buried like they were at the end of last season. When the mowers are running, I will say I run them all day long. Comparable to our riding mower, which uses gas, these mowers don't use any gas. They charge up, they typically go out for an hour, and then they come back, charge up again for an hour, go out, and they do this all day long. They are virtually quiet. I mean, the only noise you hear is really the blade touching the grass, and it is so quiet. I mean, you can run these mowers. I've run them at night, and unless you're standing real close right next to the mower, you don't even know it's running. One of the advantages to using these mowers is then you can cut your grass at night during the day. The silence of it and not having to use gas is definitely something that I've really liked. Something else I want to mention, when I purchased these mowers, they were double the price that they are right now. These mowers have been out now for a couple of years, and I know Husqvarna and other brands are coming out with newer models, larger models that do a larger span of area. The units that I bought, the 115Hs, are only rated to cover 0.4 acres of land. Now, I have just under a complete acre of land, which is why I split my yard in half, and I bought two of them so I could have one mower do one half of the yard, one mower do the other half, thinking if maybe one broke down, I can then just send it over to the other side if I needed some maintenance done on one of the mowers. Or if one of them needed to be replaced, I'm only having to replace one mower versus having two of them. This has been very affordable to me. I mean, if you go, you can look at the product link that I have down in the video description, take a look at these things. They've come down in price. They're cheaper than a riding mower these days. To get one of these Automowers, you just have to work through the process of laying that boundary wire, laying a guide wire, and getting it up and running. So has it solved all my problems? These lawnmowers are robots, and what I would compare it to is getting a pet. These mowers, and we named them just like a pet. One is Sparky, one is named Blaze, just so we can kind of tell them apart. They go out and they do what they're programmed to do, cut the grass, and that is basically what they are meant to do, and they really can't do anything else for themselves. So they are smart enough if they run into something like a tree, or if they get to the boundary wire, they will back up, turn, and try to do something else. But sometimes they may get to a dip or a pothole in our yard, and it's just too big for them to get out of. They might try turning around, they might try backing up, but now they are stuck. Now, the convenient thing with using these mowers is it does have the Husqvarna Connect app, which I have installed on my phone, and it does send you alerts. So if the mower gets obstructed by a super large stick or a dip or something like that, I get a notification that the thing has stopped, and I can go outside and fix it. Very convenient in getting that notification. with our yards being so large and with the amount of trees we have and the landscape and stuff, on average, I would say about once every other day, one of the mowers is getting stuck somewhere doing something. Sometimes it even gets stuck by some of the boundaries. Some of the areas we have, we've got mailboxes that are right up on a hill by the edge of our property. And the mowers do pretty well with hills. There's a hill in our backyard that unfortunately the mowers don't do as well with because it's a little bit steeper. But for the most part, they can handle shallower hills. But depending on the day and the weather conditions, if the grass is wetter, drier, the same hill may be more challenging for the mower one day than it is the next. So just like a pet, if the thing gets stuck or if it needs some sort of care, I have to go out and adjust it, and even maybe adjust the boundary wire that I have depending on conditions from year to year as our bushes grow more and things like that. Something that I want to let you guys know that we didn't quite figure out here until a year ago is we weren't actively using the invisible fence that we have in our yard. Now we got a new puppy last year, Tinker, who's now a year old, and we love him. He's a great dog. But then we started using our invisible fence again and noticed that when we were using the invisible fence, we hadn't been using it since we had installed the mowers. When we turned the thing back on, we noticed that the invisible fence collar that Tinker wears was being activated not just by the invisible fence wire, but anywhere that that collar was coming in contact, crossing over the guide wire or the boundary wire of the Automowers. So virtually making it impossible to use the invisible fence with that turned on and the Automowers turned on at the same time. We had called invisible fence out here. They had come out here several times trying to fix the problem. And we have now deemed that we cannot use these Automowers and the invisible fence system at the same time. So if we're letting Tinker, our dog, out and we want him to stay in the yard with the collar that gets activated by the invisible fence, we have to make sure the powers are not, we have to make sure that the Automowers are not only not running, but that they are completely powered down with the invisible fence powered up, because otherwise that interferes with the system. Very frustrating and a hassle to keep going outside and having to unplug and plug the mower systems back in every time we wanted to do this. So the system that I don't necessarily know if this is the best system, but it's working for us, is I have some smart plugs that you can control with an app on my phone. And from wherever I am at my house, I can use the app on my phone to turn those smart plugs on and off. So that if we're going to let our dog outside and he's using the invisible fence is on all the time. But when he goes outside, so that he's not getting shocked by the boundary wires or the guide wires for the mowers, I will power down the mower systems, let our dog out. When he's ready to come back in, I can then use the app to turn those mower systems back on and let the mowers continue doing their thing. Now, the mowers don't just automatically start back up if they were out and about in the yard when I shut them off. As a safety, when they shut down, they stop where they are and they're not going to restart when the power comes back on. You need to physically walk out to them and then manually go up to them, turn them back on to have them do their thing. So there's some planning that's involved with this now. We either have to, in the Husqvarna app, park the mowers before we power them down, or we need to be mindful that they need to be back in their charging stations before powering them down if we want them to come back on and start doing their schedule again automatically when we're ready to power those mowers back up. Something else that I found out the previous fall and the fall before that, and I kind of had a feeling this was going to happen when I was doing my research. The mowers are great at cutting grass. They are not great at cutting over leaves. And we've got quite a few trees in our yard, and in the fall here in Wisconsin, they drop a ton of leaves. This is where we still have our riding mower. I bring that thing out and I mulch up all the leaves that fall down on our yard. I've also got my leaf blower, things like that. Because otherwise the small Automowers, they don't chop up or mulch up those leaves. They're just too much for them to handle, and they don't effectively cut the grass if the leaves are now fallen and pressing down on the grass in the fall. The other thing is, as great as I've got them set up with the boundary wire there's a couple of areas like our fire pit that's circular in our backyard where the mowers actually go up as close as they can to the edge of that. And they do a decent job cutting, but I still need to go back with my trimmer and I need to trim around the edges because it just can't completely get that area with a nice clean look. This is the same thing going around some trees and exteriors of our house, as well as certain perimeter areas of our yard. Some trimming is still needed, so it's not a completely foolproof, effective system where I never need to go out and do any yard maintenance. But from a cutting standpoint, it does a great job covering the whole area of the yard. Since we've had these mowers, they definitely are an eye catcher. Any neighbors that are walking by or driving by, definitely slow down. If I'm outside, I've had somebody ask me if that's a giant groundhog that's roaming around in our yard, and has sparked up a conversation with me explaining to them that we have these Automowers running. Definitely a lot of curiosity with them. These are still not as common as seeing people on their riding mowers or push mowers. So for a lot of people that see these things, if I'm outside, definitely sparks some conversation. Now, with that being said, these things also attract attention. Now, they do have an alarm on them so that if somebody was going to come by and steal them, if the thing senses that it's been picked up, it does have a PIN you need to enter. And if you don't enter that PIN, a very loud, ear-piercing alarm goes off, letting everybody in the area know that this thing has been picked up as a security system to deter from people wanting to pick these things up and like steal them, take them with them. So let me give you my overall opinion about these Automowers and anything that I would recommend. So first off, I went with Husqvarna because I felt it was a very reliable brand name. There are tons of other Automower companies out there. Definitely, I would encourage you to do your research and check them out. What I liked about Husqvarna is you can get these models serviced all over the place. You can go to Husqvarna's website. You can find a service center by just typing in your zip code. At some point, if an Automower is going to break down and I'm working with a company that's overseas or something and I have to ship this thing back, or if it just stops working and all I have is phone support, to me, finding out that the brand Husqvarna had places around me that would service them was something that was helpful. I've actually taken my mowers to the service center. I did that shortly after getting one of them. They were losing connectivity. One of them was losing connectivity with the app, and so they were able to replace a chip inside the mower. That was something that was still covered under the 1-year warranty when getting the mowers. I mentioned doing your research because there's different Automowers that are rated for different sized yards. So you definitely want to figure that out. Do your research if you're getting a mower like mine that works with a boundary wire on trying to figure out where you're going to place that boundary wire, or are you going to hire somebody? You can even hire Husqvarna to come out and bury the boundary wire for you. Decisions that you would need to make. Third, in doing your research, I would look at the reviews on different mowers. I would also research the amount of space or the amount of acreage that each mower you're interested in is doing and compare them, compare them on features, find out the best mower for you. I went with these more budget, cheaper mowers. Husqvarna does sell a larger or several larger models that cover a larger acre of space. That might be something that's more of interest to you. As far as myself, I'm a do-it-yourself person. I felt that burying the boundary wire and guide wire were something that I was going to do. If you're getting a system like this, I almost am going to guarantee you that as careful as you are, you're going to have a wire break at some point with the system. Even if you feel it's not going to happen to you, between Mother Nature and animals chewing through wires and things like that, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to have a wire break at some point. Out of my going into my 3rd year here now, I've had a couple of wire breaks per year. So I would encourage you to purchase a wire detection kit, which I can link down in the video description. I've done a whole video on wire breaks, as well as I would just right off the bat buy yourself a patch kit. Buy yourself extra wire and extra couplers, because when this wire break is going to happen, you don't have to wait or go out to get these materials and not have a mower that, is not doing its job. It's down because it doesn't have that complete loop. So get those supplies ready so that in the event of a wire break, you can fix it and get things up and running again. And I've done a video on that wire brake that you can check out. That'll be linked in the video description below. I'm still constantly revising their layout as far as in the programming you can set different lawn coverage areas, and I'll kind of monitor if I notice the front yard is getting cut more than it needs to. I will lower the percentage of time the mower is going to cut in that area, have it focus on my larger backyard, and I have my backyard split into two different zones. If I notice the very back of my yard needs more attention, I can always at any time on the fly increase that lawn coverage area so that the mower focuses on that more to get all that grass cut. Everything I've talked about in this video I will link down in the video description. I will reference those other videos that I've talked about, as well as you can find all the links to the mowers that are available that I've talked about in this video down in the video description. I do weekly videos on this channel just like this with different tech, yard tools, battery systems, and more. And I would appreciate you guys if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, and hey, subscribe, and you're going to get some really cool videos coming that I do weekly on this channel. My name is Jeff, and as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to make every day awesome, and I will see you in the next video.